video we moved our model into the sculpt room and created our first sculpt pass onto that mesh. So in this video we'll continue to refine the sculpt. Before we do that, let's take a look at a couple of other things. So earlier in the series I spoke about this conform retopo mesh option here, which gives us this wireframe preview of the model that's sitting inside the modeling workspace at the moment. So first of all, inside of the modeling workspace, you can see a little bit more clearly now the original model compared to the sculpt detail that I added in the first pass. And you can see where it's starting to poke through with those sculpt edits. Now, one thing that we can do here is we can come down into the modeling workspace to where it says entire mesh, and here we can look at this option where it says snap. Now this will snap the mesh that we've generated during our modeling stage to the underlying sculpt mesh that we've just sculpted on. So let's take a look at that. Just simply hit snap and the model then snaps to the sculpt volume. Now it's worth, whenever you use this option, always check around your model, especially in these sort of areas here on the hands, if it's snapped properly, because it can lose its place on the sculpt mesh and we could get, for example, one of these vertices fly off into infinity looking for a sculpt mesh. It may have just missed the sculpt topology underneath and it will carry on for infinity and shoot off somewhere trying to look for that sculpt normal to snap to. There's another area to look out for in this particular case, which is round about the tail, because we've got quite a dense packing of polygons around the tip of the tail there. Other areas to look for are things like the claws as well. This seems to have done a fairly good job at snapping that topology. So let's just undo that. That's one option that we can use. Let's jump back over to the sculpt area now. And it's a little bit more difficult because our wireframe is ghosted and I have this white shader selected. So to make it easier for you to see, I'm just going to go down to the shader option here and I'm going to change the shader color to this orange. It's still rather difficult, but it's better to see. So here you can see that poke through on the back here. So I'm going to use my mud brush here. What I'm going to do is, with the conform retop mesh on there, I'm going to reduce the depth by which I'm sculpting. So in effect, I'm not actually sculpting, but I am working over the surface of the sculpt object in this case. And if I just brush this tool over the top, you can see that it's now snapping and conforming rather locally to that brushed area. I'm not increasing any sculpt information here because my depth value is 0. We can see that here. So here I'm just going to have a look for any areas where I've got that poke through and just brush over the top, and then you can see the mesh is conforming to that sculpt information. So this is a way of doing it more locally. The other option I showed in the modeling room was a global snap to that surface. So that's just a small tip there if, for example, you've forgotten to use the conform retopo mesh option. So why do we need to snap our original model to the underlying sculpt mesh? It will reduce our baking errors later in the process. As long as we keep making sure that our model is close to our sculpt, then we'll be okay in terms of our baking result. So this is one of the reasons why when sculpting and we do our various passes on here, we're only doing a little bit at a time. We're not going crazy and making huge edits to the sculpt without considering our low poly object underneath. So keep checking that low poly is conforming nicely to our sculpt information that we are creating. So with that said, let's now increase our multi-resolution by adding another top layer, and I'm going to add another layer. So again, give it the name, it's a sculpt layer. This is going to be my second pass, and working on this particular layer now, I can go in with my mud brush and start to work on some of these details here in the neck. So let's make a start, and smaller brush size now, and I'll just start to draw in these details, and using my shift to smooth those out as they blend into the main body. Let's just increase these a little bit more. There's a lot of skin folds here in the neck, and I'm not going to reproduce that completely, but you get the idea that, and we've got that extra detail here that we're just adding and smoothing as we go. I think it's best practice to just reduce the size of the sculpt. So if it's too high, as I've mentioned before, you're just going to make really large edits like this, and you don't want to do that. You want to build it up slowly. So bring that down, and you can use the depth slider here and just build up your strokes as you're doing it, and you'll get a much better result. So I'm going to use Alt, dig in here, and just split this fold into two, causing sort of a divot into the skin here. Let's just smooth that out. We're going to do more passes, still at a fairly low resolution. We don't want to detail, even at this stage, we don't want to start detailing too much. So with this done, we can see that we've got our second pass layer now, and this is the area that we've been working on. And if I turn that layer off, you can see the work that I've just done on there. So here I can reduce the depth of that sculpt work that I've done on my second pass layer and just dial that back to where I feel it's needed. I'm quite happy at 100% here for that amount of detail. Just have a look around. Maybe I need to just reduce this down a little bit, so I'll use my smooth. Just looking at it from the top, it seemed a little bit sticking out a little bit too much. Something like that is fine, but we still have that complete control. And even if I turn off the first pass here, we can still see the work that I've done on the second pass layer without the first pass. But the idea of this is to build one on top of the other as we go. And also, if we look at our res up and res down here, if I res down, you can see that the edits that I'm making are remaining at a lower resolution all the way down back to 1 there. So the edits I've made on the first and second pass sculpt layers are still updating on that lower resolution. Let's move back up again and continue working. My preference is not to have the conform retop mesh selected when I'm sculpting, because every time I do a sculpt stroke on my model, then I'm going to have a tiny lag where the preview mesh here conforms to those strokes that I've made. And I prefer to just work quickly and then snap the mesh to those strokes that I've made. So for example, I'll finish the head off here and then snap the geometry to the sculpt, and that's my preferred method. So I'll go ahead and turn this off, but if you prefer to keep that on, then feel free to do so. So we'll continue to work in these areas, and let's start over here, and we'll just move across. A little bit too harsh on there. Let's go over back to my mud brush on here. Let's start to draw in these elements and how these features connect to the larger areas that we've created. Brow goes over the top. I won't be talking all the way through this now, as I will try to explain as I go along when I reach important areas. So it's important that you, again, when you are smoothing, it's a bit difficult to see with this because of the color on here, but this green line in my cursor, keep that relatively low as well. If it's too high, when you come to smooth, you'll just destroy most of the detailed work that you create with that. So it's a good idea to keep the strength of the smoothing quite low, just so you're not going to destroy and lose any details that you've created. Again, around here, if I had too strong a smoothing setting, then I would just lose all of this detail. And if you remember when we were modeling and we were using the Catmull clock, this was an area that we just tweaked using that Catmull clock preview, and we can see now why that will benefit us, because we've got much better geometry and loops around here. If you go a little bit too far with this, you don't want to use the smoothing, then you can always move over to the move brush here. Just remember to just do very small movements, just pushing inwards as well, just to bring that back. Always remember that behind the scenes here, we've got this topology of our low poly mesh. We don't want this sculpt to be poking too far through, so pulling and pushing in a severe way will cause us some issues later on. But like I said, it was very important that we thought ahead to the sculpting stage whilst modeling, and it's a very good practice to get into as you're learning. And all this detail that I'm putting in now is going to bake down really nicely later on in the process. And of course we're going to have a lot more resolution than this. So I'm going to try and get this area here in a little bit more. And you probably can't understand how lightly I'm actually working here. I'm not pressing on hard at all with the stylus. It's very easy to press to make large impressions on the sculpt, and then you'll be forever correcting those and trying to remove. We have a really good base here with our model, and we're just building up on top of that stroke by stroke. We've done all the groundwork in the modeling room here, and we don't want to destroy that, and we don't want to waste all that effort that we put in it to lay that groundwork. Okay, so let's take a look at the nose area here, and you can see we've got these ridges on here. So they are quite small on this reference, but I haven't got enough resolution to go that small yet. So what I'll do again is I'll just brush across here some larger nodules, and they kind of just fizzle out towards the back around there. Once I've done that, again with the smooth, not too harsh, very lightly smoothing over, not to destroy those little nodules that I've been placing there, because it's very easy just to get rid of them. And what was the point of doing it if all I was going to do was smooth them out afterwards? So we're just bringing them back into there, and then we can move and just maybe move them across here and increase the size of them. Again, smoothing out straight away. And as we add more resolution, we can put a lot more of this detail in here. Just tapping gently just to fill those out a little bit more. You've got a tool here called Inflate. You could go over this area here and just inflate these as well. Just make a little bit more of kind of a nodule shape over the eyes. Straight away, just smooth those out, just so we've got more of an even distribution and not too many sharp angles and stretching of our geometry here. Because we are in surface mode here, because that's the way that our multi-resolution works. It only works in surface mode. So we haven't got the luxury of voxels where we would be able to remesh this quite easily. We want to keep things as they are with that lower to higher multi-resolution pipeline that we've got going. So let's go back over to the rapid smooth brush and let's start to just break the surface up here. This is one of my favorite brushes, this one is, and I really like just the intersection of the strokes on here, the details, the happy accidents it gives me as I'm working my way around. And again, this is another area, if you remember, where we put that extra geometry in there, and this is where it really pays off and helps me to be able to get these levels of detail in here, even at this low resolution. So you will notice as well, for example, it's a good area here. We've got a low resolution in this area. And here I've got quite a high resolution. And that is all because of the polygon distribution, the way that I was modeling at the beginning. It's not necessarily a good thing. Maybe I should have put a little bit more geometry in here because we've got quite a lot of detail here. So this is where we learn as we go that certain areas, when we're modeling, we have to analyze those areas from our concepts and figure out how much geometry are we going to need in there, how much detail are we going to need in these areas. Every time I press the add top level, everything gets subdivided. So this becomes even more intense and this becomes a little bit better. But it's always going to be, I'm always going to be having less geometry here than I do here, is what I'm trying to explain. Let's move underneath this eye here. Again, I've got some extra geometry under here because it was quite tight under there. I'm going to just move on and concentrate on another area. Let's dig in underneath the jaw here, bringing this around, smooth that out. So by digging in there, I'm trying to emphasize some sort of bone and jawbone on there. Just make a little bit more of a fold underneath here. And this is a really nice opportunity to really get some details in here, even though it's quite low res. I really enjoy working on these sort of areas here where we've got a mixture of bone and thick skin and actual structure of the throat and muscles in here as well. So let's work our way across the top a little bit more, and not too much detail. As I said, I don't really want to work on this anymore, but I do want to just, it's too smooth on the top. I just want to start to make some impression and just start to work this a little bit more. We've got this little recess in here. That's this part here. And all these bumps and lumps at the back of the head, just a little bit of skull and fatty deposits at the back here. We're just trying to get those in and work those in. So let's have a look at this area here on the back of the neck. Let's move our reference over. So we made some impressions here, and I'm going to do the same now, but with this extra resolution I'm going to work them a little bit more. So we've got these ones here which are roughly going in between and they're intersecting. And as I said before, I really enjoy working on these intersection parts where muscle and bone and tendons are all working together, and these are the interesting areas where the skin is being stretched across a larger muscle mass here and here. As we wrap this video up here, I mentioned about the spines, so let's take a look at that. Let's hop over back into the modeling room, and I'm going to turn off the body and bring back the spines, and we can see here now roughly where those spines are, and they're going to get lost if I continue to build this sculpt up. Those are going to get lost in the back here, so I have to be aware of those. Now they are quite small anyway on here, so we're okay at the moment, and I don't want them all to be all even, so I like the fact that some of them are lower than others, but this one, for example, is a little bit too high, so we need to correct that one. So jumping back into the modeling room, just keep tabs on those extra pieces to your model, because they will eventually have to be combined with the sculpt. So we do need to make sure everything is working together. As we wrap this video up, all I'm going to do now is just snap this mesh here to the new sculpt edits that I've been making. So we come over to snap that there. Check your model through, check everything's okay, we're all good, and then we can move on. So in the next video, we'll continue to work on our sculpt and create more details for the rest of the body. See you next time.